Rachel Carson, an author and advocate of nature, once said, "One way to open your eyes is to ask yourself, what if I had never seen this before? What if I knew I would never see it again?" This shows exactly what reality many people faced in the 1900s as they watched hundreds of acres of wilderness being destroyed to make room for more development. However, some of these people took action to protect the places that they loved. One of these people was Ansel Adams, whose memorable and inspiring photographs helped him communicate that nature is worth protecting. He captured mountains, redwoods, deserts, oceans, and other natural wonders of the West Coast for generations to come. During the 1900s, Ansel Adams used his photographs and books to communicate the beauty and importance of the wilderness, continuing the legacy of conservation pioneered by Teddy Roosevelt and John Muir. Adams' photographs were emotionally moving, and they inspired people to protect the places they depicted. A combination of his work, passion for nature, and position in the Sierra Club ultimately helped him propel environmental conservation into a widespread movement. Conservation pioneer John Muir had been interested in nature since childhood, and by the time he graduated from college, had dedicated his life to researching and protecting it. He published many articles about science and conservation that brought him prestige in the scientific community. In 1892, Muir founded the Sierra Club with the goal for it to help people explore, enjoy, and render accessible the mountain region of the Pacific Coast. In 1903, President Teddy Roosevelt visited John Muir in Yosemite. The 3-day wilderness trip was where Roosevelt became really interested in conservation. From then on, Muir and Roosevelt were good friends and worked together to help preserve about 230 million acres of public land. Roosevelt believed that our people should see to it that natural wonders are preserved for their children and their children's children forever, with their majestic beauty all unmarred. Their efforts helped kickstart the conservation movement, but they still needed someone who could bring the conservation movement to national attention. Ansel Adams was born on February 20th, 1902 in San Francisco, California, and grew up at the same time as the conservation movement. He found school very difficult, so when he was 12, his father pulled him out and homeschooled him. As a young adult, he initially wanted to be a concert pianist. However, after visiting Yosemite National Park in 1916, he decided to pursue being a photographer. While in Yosemite, he got a job at the Sierra Club's LeConte Lodge. His early photography work was as a technician for a commercial firm. This was where he became skilled in editing photographs in the darkroom. He used these skills extensively in his later pictures to make them more stunning. In 1930, Adams met another photographer named Paul Strand. Strand taught Adams photography techniques that he used for the rest of his life. One of these techniques was called straight photography. This style emphasizes clarity, so that the final print does not look edited by the camera or the darkroom. Adams once said, "A photograph, because of its intense realism, must be completely accurate in mood and factual relationships." This dedication to showing the object accurately may have been what made Adams' photographs so inspiring. John Sharkowski, a photographer and historian, described Adams' photographs as different from what we see in any landscape photographer before him. They are concerned with the description of the light that they modulate, the light that justifies their relationship to each other. In 1932, Adams was featured in the M.H.D. Young Museum in San Francisco. This was the first time he received major publicity, and it boosted him to national fame. In 1936, Alfred Stieglitz, a highly influential photographer, editor, and art gallery director, gave Adams a spot in his New York gallery. This was a huge breakthrough for Adams' photography career, and it gave him more and more influence. Although many people were awed and inspired by Adams' work, he received some criticism, since some people disapproved of him photographing rocks during a worldwide economic depression and the threat of another world war. They thought that the beauty of nature was trivial compared to human problems. To this, Adams responded that the understanding of the inanimate and animate world of nature will aid in holding the world of man together. Ansel Adams' vision, communicated through his photographs, helped people understand the connection between nature and the developed world. It showed how humans' problems can be connected to nature, and that the first step to the solution is understanding nature. Most of his photography was done during his younger years, and in his later years, he shifted most of his effort to the conservation movement. In his autobiography, Ansel Adams declared that we have come up from the caves with almost the suddenness of a nova's burst. We have entered a new dimension of thought and awareness of nature. We dream of the time when it shall house one great family of cooperative beings. Adams believed that it was in our hands to make sure the earth was not destroyed by humanity. He wanted everything on earth to be in harmony. Later in his life, Adams mainly worked on reinterpreting his earlier work and editing books of his own work. He often worked with his collaborator, Nancy Newhall. Together, they published many books and articles with Adams' photographs and Newhall's descriptions. Newhall had experience writing for photography collections and had even worked with Adams' mentor, Paul Strand. Adams' books were sometimes collections of his photographs, others were guides, and some were about the importance of conservation. One of his most famous books about conservation was This is the American Earth. Supreme Court Justice William O. Douglas declared that it is one of the great statements in the history of conservation. This book became famous alongside other conservation awareness books, including Rachel Carson's Silent Spring. However, some of his most influential actions came from his position on the board of directors of the Sierra Club. In 1934, Adams was elected onto its board of directors. He worked with the club to create national parks to protect the environment from destructive developmental projects. One of the most notable times Adams' work at the club was used for environmental purposes was during the creation of Kings Canyon National Park. Kings Canyon was an area near Sequoia National Park, but since it wasn't technically part of the park, it was threatened by the lumber business and farmers. Another threat to the area was the fact that it could have been made to have incredible hydrokinetic power. Los Angeles wanted to build multiple dams along the canyon, which would flood parts of it and dry up parts of it, changing the whole structure of the valley. All of these threats of destruction were halted, however, when Adams put together a collection of photographs from the region to convince Congress to make it into a national park. His collection was successful, and Kings Canyon is still in its natural state today. Because of his work in photography and conservation, Adams received 2 major medals of honor. The first was the Conservation Service Award in 1968, and the second was the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1980. While giving Adams this medal, President Jimmy Carter said, "It is through Adams' foresight and fortitude that so much of America has been saved for future Americans." David Brower, a former president of the Sierra Club, also described Ansel Adams' influence, stating, "We saw beauty because Ansel had seen it first and had interpreted it with a strength that was identifiable at 100 yards. If there were an Ansel Adams print, you would know it. It just sort of sang out." Even though he is no longer alive, Ansel Adams' work continues to influence the world. If he had not shown the world the beauty of wilderness, many national parks and undeveloped land would no longer be in their natural state. And if there is one thing the nation learned from him, it is that nature is incredibly beautiful, and that if we work together, we can preserve and protect it.